welcome to REMIC TV. I'm Jasmine Bowen, and you are watching The Elephant in the Room. And on this episode, we have three very special guests. We're talking about nerd culture and all the things that you always wanted to ask those Dungeons & Dragons role players. But before we get into it, let me remind our viewers about our contest that we have going on. Do you want to win $500? $500 sounds pretty good, right, guys? $500 just for referring your friends to REMIC TV. So click on our contest banner, enter your friends' names, tell them about the great video that you watched today on REMIC TV, and there you go. You have an entry to win $500 every month. And at the end of our contest, you could win $10,000. That's right, $10,000 to one lucky grand prize winner at the end of our contest, just for talking about what you watched today on REMIC TV. Sounds easy? It is. Get on in and do it. Now, I'd like to welcome Joshua, Dominic, and Larry. Welcome to The Elephant in the Room, guys. Now, you guys are all gamers of a sort, right?
Yes.
Yep. But are you computer gamers? I mean, this is what's in mainstream?
Well, that's not what we're about, really.
No. All right. You guys are role players, and there's a lot of misconceptions about role-playing and Dungeons & Dragons. So let me ask you guys the biggest common myth out there. I believe in the 80s, when Dungeons & Dragons first came out, there was a suicide related to it. Some kids were playing it in the steam tunnels of their university, and I guess someone got too into the game and committed suicide.
Well, yes, there was a big hullabaloo about this, but it turned out that the preliminary announcement by a detective was false. The person who supposedly committed suicide actually showed up. It was either 3 weeks or 3 months later, I can't remember the exact details, in another state. He had just gone on a trip.
He had just gone on a trip?
Yes, that's right.
So there was no possession, demons?
No.
None of that, monsters?
Well, they say he was a slightly troubled person, but I don't think D&D had anything to do with it.
All right, now Dungeons & Dragons, for those of you who don't know, who are a little more mainstream, is a live-action role-playing game, or tabletop role-playing game. Essentially, you're choosing a character, a monster, a superhero, any of that, and you're rolling dice to determine your fate. And you guys are all regular players about this, so maybe you can tell me a little bit about how you got into it. Maybe we'll start here.
Well, I started role-playing games in grade 7. Some friends of mine introduced it to me. I actually started playing with their father.
Okay. All right, so this is not just a child game.
No, and actually 2 people's parents introduced it to me, and they were both in the military.
Okay, so is this something that the military actively does?
It seems something that the Canadian and American military both do a fair bit of, just because when you have a lot of time and you can't, go to the movies or whatever whenever you want, because usually you're fairly isolated.
Right.
It's a great way to pass the time.
All right.
I started back in the early 70s, actually, about the time that D&D first came about. I just read Lord of the Rings, I think, a couple times before I was 14, so I was really primed for it. And somebody got this little blue box, this basic set. And I remember reading it, and it made no sense to me whatsoever. And then I found a couple other people, and it made no sense to all of us, but we still so we had no idea what we were really doing, but it was just, to us, really cool to imagine that, we were knights and wizards, and we were fighting fierce monsters and rolling the dice and just having a great time. We just had movies playing in our heads.
All right.
I would have been about 9, and some friends of mine had picked it up, much like Joshua or Dominic, and they introduced me to it, and then I bought my own copy, and I've been playing them ever since, going from game to game, and trying most of the games there are to some degree. And I've been playing them since, and I've been an avid player since that time.
All right, now the common theory is that you guys are playing this in your parents' basement, or I guess in your basement if you're a grown adult, maybe still in your parents' basement, with a bunch of other socially awkward people, but this is not true in the mainstream media. There's a lot of celebrities who have come out to talk about this.
I mean, that's true. I've heard that Vin Diesel plays Dungeons and Dragons.
Vin Diesel.
And I think a fair number of people know Will Wheaton.
I think Will Wheaton is very open about that.
It's also been portrayed in a lot of different other kinds of media.
Okay.
I mean, there's been comic books about it. There's been a cartoon. There's been a major motion picture. Kids were playing it in E.T. the Extraterrestrial.
Really?
Yeah. And you know, it ends up in comics like Foxtrot that everybody reads in their paper.
All right, so this is not just a little underground culture anymore. And let's talk about Fan Expo. Fan Expo is in the summer in Toronto. And Fan Expo, I just learned, is actually the biggest convention in Canada. And every year, Fan Expo actually shuts down the convention center.
Oh, yes.
Have you guys been to Fan Expo? Maybe you could share your experiences. Tell me what it's about.
Yeah, it's Fan Expo is for, I mean, fan culture in general, from science fiction fans to anime fans to gaming fans.
Now, who attends Fan Expo? So the fans, right?
Yeah.
But, I mean, are you just fans hanging out, or what draws you there?
All kinds of things. It depends on which one you're interested in and where you go. I mean, a lot of us share similar interests. So, I mean, comic book fans who are also big role-playing game fans will go game a little, meet various comic artists, buy various merchandise, because a lot of the time you get the merchandise that you really have a very hard time getting anywhere else.
Now, Fan Expo, as we mentioned, it shuts down the convention center. I mean, guys, this is big. This is not a little underground culture anymore.
No, it's tens of thousands of people attend every year.
And on top of that, the celebrities of the year usually attend as well.
Oh, yes. You always get nowadays past stars from Battlestar Galactica, from Star Trek, from Stargate. All of those, a lot of the science fiction ones come in. Stan Lee has shown up a number of times.
Now, Stan Lee, let's back up for a second. Stan Lee is one of the biggest celebrities on the planet, and people may not know him, but what has Stan Lee done?
What's his art?
He's art.
He's the comic artist who created Spider-Man, who's been drawing, who drew and has been a very major backbone of Marvel comic books.
I need to jump in here. Stan Lee does not draw. He's the creative mind behind Marvel.
Okay.
So at the very beginning, he is the person who started up Marvel.
Now, as of recently, comic book movies are the new big thing. Superhero movies actually hold the box office record at the moment. So I don't know whether your culture is growing or whether it's becoming more mainstream, but you guys hold the box office record.
Dominic and I were discussing how we don't think there is such thing as a mainstream anymore.
Okay.
Really. There's just so many diverse interests, and now people can all unite over them very easily on the internet, so that helps a lot.
So the internet has definitely helped to
huge.
dispel myths.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
All right, so Fan Expo, you have huge celebrities attending and tens of thousands of fans, and I believe last year by Saturday at noon the convention was shut down. Now what would I see inside of Fan Expo?
Oh wow, you'd see something.
I see a lot.
You'd see a fair bit of skin for one thing.
Oh
Yes.
So it's not just, I mean, excuse my French, but it's not just fat, unattractive nerds at Fan Expo.
No.
Please tell me.
No, not at all. Well, people really take their stuff seriously. I mean, they watch their shows like Battlestar Galactica or Star Wars or whatever it is that they like, and then they go all out
Really?
to dress and appear as their character, as their favorite character. So you see people as, stormtroopers are very, very common, but you see, Cylons, the beautiful babe Cylons really dressed to the nines, and they do it well. They do it very, very well. And then there's anime, which is a huge thing, that, all these girls are dressed as Japanese maids and what have you, anime characters of various types. So yeah, there's a lot of skin involved in that.
So Fan Expo's the place to be.
It is. It's really a happening place.
Yes.
It really is pretty exciting.
Now, speaking of skin, there's a video recently on YouTube in which some very particular celebrities were playing Dungeons and Dragons. Maybe Joshua, you want to tell us about it?
Well, I believe the series actually started back in 2010.
Okay.
But there was this fairly well-renowned, in certain circles anyway, series of videos about a group of porn stars and strippers
Porn stars and strippers are playing these games. This is not just for nerds anymore.
playing Dungeons and Dragons.
All right, like who?
Well, I forget most of their names, but I do recall Sasha Grey.
Sasha Grey, and Sasha Grey is a
episodes.
big name in porn right now. And now, for anyone who's getting too excited out there, are they playing them with clothes on?
Yes.
Unfortunately.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty popular blog out there run by the guy who runs the games that the
Okay.
porn stars play in, and he's been doing this for, like you said, at least a year now. And I noticed it about a year ago, and it's just a bunch of people playing D&D. But the big thing is that they're porn stars, so
Right.
you know, it attracts a lot of attention.
And they seem to be having a good time.
Yeah.
Oh, sure.
Well, now have any of you guys played D&D with porn stars? Not yet?
Not that I know of.
All right. So we have Fan Expo out there. We have these huge celebrities coming out. We have porn stars playing Dungeons and Dragons. What else have you noticed that's kind of mainstreamed your culture recently? The superhero movies?
Well, Lord of the Rings was a big deal.
Yes.
I mean, after the release of Lord of the Rings, we had a lot of like new 14-year-old, 15-year-old people showing up at conventions in numbers bigger than they were the year previous. So
yeah,
that was a
and
big
when
deal.
Lord of the Rings came out, I mean, it was revolutionary for what it did, the Oscars it's won, how it filmed. So the attendance at the conventions.
It did spike, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
There's even things like games like Settlers of Catan coming
Okay.
in. So there's been this rise of Euro games. I mean, millions and millions of people have played Settlers of Catan. And that's something that, you have at these conventions, these gaming conventions. You have Settlers of Catan tournaments.
Board games. And
Yeah, you get a lot of board games, and I mean, it used to be that it was heavily war games that where people would put out their armies and fight them out. But even just straight board games now have their own fandom because there's a massive culture that started getting especially large overseas of just board games.
Right.
And now it's so big that it's flooded the world with people
Yes.
who just play all kinds of games.
I would like to just mention something about the mainstreaming of the
Right.
gaming culture. For the longest time, the best-selling books have been fantasy role-playing
Yes,
books.
this is true.
Right, the Forgotten Realms series
Yeah.
of fantasy books have
And
been
they are the top movies now.
they've been flooding the market for
Yeah.
decades, and the biggest readers of these are women. So they're actually a natural fit for Dungeons and Dragons. And that's the other thing I've been noticing is that the percentage of women playing the game has been steadily on the rise in
Right.
the last 10, 15 years.
And we talked about how at Fan Expo, the women and the skin is coming out. And
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Now-
a good place to be.
I see. Now, these are games. We're referring to them as games. Are they appropriate for children?
The games are run by usually somebody who knows the game well.
Okay.
So there's somebody in charge in a role-playing game typically.
Right.
Now, I got my kids into the game at about 10 or 11.
Okay.
Okay. Really, you have to be old enough to sit down for several hours and focus on the game and not act out and not be ridiculous and
Okay.
just play the game.
But are you acting at all when you're playing the games, or?
Not in a sort of run around with heavy objects.
Sure,
kind
but
of way.
I recently sat in at a session and I heard some character voices.
Oh yes.
And
Oh
Yes,
yes.
of course.
Yeah. Many players love to do their character voice.
Well, I mean, you spend a significant amount of time, especially depending on the game system, role-playing as your character, saying what they're saying.
Right.
Reacting like them at the table.
Okay.
As far as eligibility for children, I mean, it depends entirely on what game it is and who is playing it that can oversee
That makes
it.
the difference.
I mean, it entirely makes. There are games that are perfectly appropriate for 5-year-olds.
Right.
Usually there are parents playing to control the game to see what happens, but it's perfectly appropriate. I mean, it's essentially no different than playing cops and robbers. You're just pretending to be someone else and having fun and seeing where things lead.
All right. Well, it sounds like you guys have some great stories, and the culture really is mainstreaming. We'll be right back. This is The Elephant in the Room. I'm Jasmine Bowen, and we're talking about nerd culture, and it's not just for nerds, even more. Even the porn stars are getting into it. The conventions are filled with supermodel-like women. It's a great place to be. So go get a drink of water, maybe Google Dungeons & Dragons, and come right on back to check out the second part of this video.